Hello, good evening, and welcome. My name is Christopher Wood. I'm the Executive Director of LGBT Tech, and I'm joined by our STEAM panel, so I'll have Kristen introduce in just a moment. But I kind of wanted to give a little bit of background for those online and both in here in person, a little bit of background about this program. Under the Obama administration, we've attended several different LGBTQ and STEAM or LGBTQ tech events, and oftentimes we heard about LGBTQ individuals not necessarily being represented in STEAM. And quite frankly, it's a systemic issue for many minorities to be not represented in the STEAM fields. And so we really wanted to make sure to bring a program together that really allowed LGBTQ current STEAM professionals to tell their story, to talk about their real life experiences of getting into the field, and maybe some of the challenges they've been through, the lessons they've learned, and really create that connection, that platform for them to tell their story. So all four of these panelists have actually been interviewed by us over the pandemic. They graciously, actually Ginger was before the pandemic, but that's okay. But they graciously took their time to tell their story and talk about their experience. And we're so excited to have them here today, both for our viewers in the audience, but also online. I know we have about 40 students watching across the country, so we're really excited about that and ensuring that we're being as inclusive as possible. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our program manager, who's really gotten this off the ground. I do want to take a moment to acknowledge all the hard work she's put into not only finding some of our panelists and the individuals participating, but really helping to develop the program in what it is today. We'll have a couple of exciting announcements a little bit later because the program does come with a couple other options or portions of it. And so we're very excited about those announcements. So without further ado, Kristen.
Thank you. Can you all hear me? Yes. Okay, awesome. My name is Kristen Kelly. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Programs and Communications Manager at LGBT Tech. Thank you all so much for being here. We're so excited to be here with you in person and to have the opportunity to have this panel live and in person. And so I'm just going to give a little bit of background about our panelists, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So we have Ginger Chen, who is an open mic storyteller, 80s queer cover band keyboardist, typewriter collector, and cell phone engineer. And it wasn't until late in life that she saw that communications was at the heart of everything that she does. She is a chapter officer at PFLAG, supporting families and building safe spaces for queer youth. And she has dozens of patents and promotes the creative power of queerness and innovation. And we have Kimberly Ayers, who is an assistant professor of mathematics at California State University. She holds a PhD in mathematics from Iowa State University and a BA from Bowdoin College. Her research is in the areas of dynamical systems, chaos theory, ergodic theory, and mathematics.
You're doing great.
Yeah. Mathematical biology. This is not my background. And she is also passionate about making the field of mathematics accessible to people of all identities and backgrounds. And when she's not doing math, you can find her on her bike, climbing rocks, or generally outside. And we have Brian Mobley, who is a project manager at FusionSpan, who specializes in web, marketing, automation, social media campaigns, and digital creative projects. He is currently located in Florida and has worked in the advertising and marketing industry for over 10 years. He loves tackling challenges, optimizing processes, and learning new programs. And in his free time, he also plays alto sax, cooks new dishes, likes biking along the beach, and hanging out with his family and friends. And we have Dawn Wages, who is a web, data, and ethical OSS engineer that works in the Django and Python community. She has been consulting in various forums as an out black lesbian, and aims to make a home for queer people of color in the Python community. Getting introduced to software development has changed her life, and through the anti-racist ethical source license, Django Girls, Django and Python contributions, and creating career opportunities for queer people of color. So thank you all so much for being here with us today. We're so excited to have you here from all over the country. So we're going to go ahead and get started, and we're also going to leave a little bit of time at the end of the panel for Q&A. So if you could each introduce yourself, please include your pronouns, and please just feel free to give a little bit of background about yourself and the work that you do. So if we can start with Dawn.
My name's Dawn Wages, she, her pronouns. I am a Python community product manager at Microsoft. I'm so excited to be here. I'm also on the board of directors for the Python Software Foundation. I volunteer in the Django community a lot with conference and event organizing. I love code of conducts. I love code of conducts. In which I also stem into the ethical open source license community. I work and am an advocate for Organization for Ethical Source, and as we mentioned before, the anti-racist ethical license. So if you have any of those things sound really interesting to you, please reach out to me. You can find me on Twitter a little bit too much at Dawn Wages Says. Email is also good. I think my email is floating around the internet. I do not want on the live stream, but you can find me on my Twitter. So.
Cool. Thanks, Simon. Hi, I'm Brian Mobley. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a digital project manager with FusionSpan. Basically, what we ended up doing is implementing a lot of Salesforce platforms for our clients. That was just now. In my past life, I worked a lot in the advertising industry. Basically, I was there when the advertising talks were about, hey, whatever's on the newspaper, scan it, put it on the computer, and let it go, to everything now. We need to support the website and the digital platform. So it was very amazing to be a part of that. In my free time, I volunteer with the Stonewall National Archive and Museum down in Fort Lauderdale, one of the largest homes of LGBTQIA plus in the United States. So that's a little bit about me. I'll turn it over to you, Kimberly.
Thanks, Brian. So yeah, like Kristen said, my name is Kimberly Ayers. I use she, her pronouns. I am a professor in the math department at California State University in San Marcos, which is about half an hour north of San Diego. So for those of you who are less familiar with California geography. And yeah, I do theoretical math, and I kind of sometimes can't believe that someone is willing to pay me to do what I do, because it feels so abstract. But I mean, obviously, in addition to the research that I do, a big part of my job is teaching. I teach usually 2 or 3 classes every semester. I think my class is happening right now as I speak without me with my substitutes. And so, I feel really passionate about encouraging my students, if they are considering a career in mathematics or thinking about majoring in math, trying to open up that math major to people from, historically underrepresented backgrounds, making, I can't tell you, the number one response that I get when I tell people what I do is, oh, I hate math, right? Number one response. And so I joke, I'm like, math has a bit of a PR problem. And so I'm trying to, through events like these, I'm trying to get out there and talk about like how wonderful math is, and how I think that the study of math really is and should be open to anybody. And so, yeah, I'm very much not a part of the tech world, I feel like. And so I was telling them all that they were going to have to like slow down on the jargon a little bit sometimes. I'm not going to know what everything means, but there is still math kind of sitting behind everything. And so, yeah, I love that I do a lot.
Hi, my name is Ginger Chin. My pronouns are she and her. I am an out trans woman who transitioned on the job about, it's getting close to 15 years ago. That was an interesting journey all by itself. My career progression has been kind of interesting as well, because it started out in nuclear weapons work. And today I'm doing something quite different. So there is an interesting arc as far as my career progression has gone. I think if I were to summarize, I was talking to Brian earlier, if I was to summarize my path at arriving at this point in my technology career, it has been one of continuous clarification of what I find important. And you can kind of see that first job to my current job. But along the way, there has always been amazing technical challenge. It has always been exciting. It has always allowed me to be creative and problem solve. But there are different ways to do that. And that's what has brought me to the place where I am today, where I get to goof around with cell phones, security services, and various special projects. that that eventually have to exist within cell phones as products and services. So it's always been fun. It's just been an interesting path getting through all the fun to where I am today.
Thank you all so much. And that's one of the things I love about this program is that we really get to engage with professionals from all across STEAM fields. And it's really amazing to hear what you all are passionate about in your work. And so I'm curious, what is the most rewarding part of your job or the work that you do? So actually, Ginger, we can start with you.
Sure. So I mentioned that the most rewarding part is the creative aspect. And I've actually discovered a whole new creative aspect to my work. Yes, there are the daily problems, the daily challenges, everything from budget to schedule to feasibility to groundbreaking technology. One of the things that I've stepped into in recent years is really diving into inventive work. So there's an entire field of engineering that looks beyond what we're trying to sell today and looks at what it is that we want to have available for the world 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And within that system is the world of patents, which gives individuals or organizations the opportunity to create really visionary ideas, declare what it is that they think is going to be meaningful about those technologies, even if it's hard to grasp today, and to stake that out as part of what they see emerging into the world, either as products or as ideas or social change or whatever the case may be. I think the visionary aspect, that creative side of the engineering work, is probably what's most exciting to me today.
Thank you so much. Kimberly, for you, what is the most rewarding part of your work?
There's two answers to this. And the first is definitely my students. I can't tell you. So I teach, not only do I teach classes that are intended for students who have already declared a math major, but I have a lot of classes for students who are not planning on majoring in math, right? So they have to take like a calculus course or a statistics course as part of their general study or for their major, but they are not themselves math majors. And getting comments from students saying like, I never thought I could be a math person, or you made me enjoy math for the first time, is like, I can't help but leave with a smile on my face when I have students who say those kinds of things. Because, I think, and I think I said this in my interview, and this is, again, this is not my quote, I'm taking this from someone else, but I think that people don't hate math, they hate how somebody made them feel about math. And I guess that's also a paraphrase of Maya Angelou, right? So, to have a student, like, I have people come up and they're like, oh, math, you're either right or you're wrong. And I'm like, that's actually so not true. That's such a misconception about math. And trying to get more people to see, like, the subjectivity in math and the communication skills that are required and the way that you need to not just be able to do math, but be able to, communicate that to others and get that out there in the world and relate with other people. And so I think when students realize this stuff for the first time, it kind of opens up the world a little bit. And then along those lines, of course, like I got into math because I found that math just really I felt like math was the language to describe the way that I kind of interacted with the world from the get-go. And so when I realized that there were people who were out there who like did this as a job and studied this, and it wasn't like I could just do fun logic puzzles all day. Like, I mean, sometimes those logic puzzles are really hard and they make you feel terrible. But when you understand something, or when you get the answer to something you've been searching for a long time, it's like it's such a high. I've never really done drugs, but I imagine I imagine it's a similar feeling. It's just like such an incredible feeling.
Kimberly, would you mind sharing a little bit about the applied mathematics that you did with your students during the pandemic? Because I thought that was really
for sure,
incredible.
Yeah. So one thing I taught differential equations in the spring, and one really cool application of what we were learning was looking at what are called SIR models. So SIR, S stands for generally susceptible, infected, and then recovered. So this is a model of a spread of infectious disease, which is of course very relevant to today's day and age. And it's really cool because like you can, as you build your model, you can take different things into account in your model, right? And so, and then seeing the mathematical implications of those things that you take into effect. So that it was like, okay, we see that spread of public health measures, like the way that we kind of encode that within the mathematical language, and then seeing the consequences of you know, more, the social distancing and washing hands and wearing masks, vaccination rates, right? Like writing that into your model and seeing not only does that help like vaccinated individuals, but also it helps the community as a whole, right? And so again, like equations don't have a political agenda, right? They just tell you this information. And so seeing it translated into that language and seeing the ramifications of that, it's something that I really love, and I think my students really enjoyed doing as well. So that's one application of some of the work that I've done.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I so wish that I had had a math teacher like you at some point in my life, because I might have ended up somewhere very different. Brian, for you, what is the most rewarding part of your work and your job?
Okay. The most rewarding part of my work and my job is being the go-to person for the project. I basically get a contract, and I have to help the team figure out who's doing what and when things need to trigger and when things need to go, and at the same time be the regulator, which I don't like doing sometimes, but you have to be that one to say, hey, we're way off course, bringing it back in. So I like doing that. I kind of find it funny because growing up, I was the person that my friends were like, hey, what are we doing? What's the plan, Brian? Where are we going out tonight? And I'd always have an idea of what we should be doing or what we could be doing. And now I get to do it and get paid for it. So that's a good part.
Amazing. And done.
Yeah, I wish I could like borrow some of like Brian's like desire to plan and organize. It is still very much a core part of my job, but I don't know if it's my favorite part. So twofold. My previous life, I was a Python software engineer. And I've never stopped developing them in open source and on the Wagtail core team, which is a Django CMS, and I'm very proud of that community that we have as well. But in that realm, I love the cyclical process of working on a ticket, coding through the acceptance criteria, submitting my PR, going through review, and having it merged. That like just the little endorphins. So I'm with you, Kimberly. I just love the endorphins of just having that feature merge, or like fixing that really freaking bug. And I miss that a little bit. But I have like recently transitioned to waxing poetic about my second most favorite thing is community. And so I get to talk to people about like what is open source community and talk about the praxis of good community. And I can talk with really cool queer and melanated people about what does indigenous cultures do with their community and how we can like incorporate that into open source and how who is doing it right. And like I am of the just this wonderful group of people, mostly on the Twitter sphere. I retweet really awesome people. Just constantly thinking about like how to make people safe and what does it mean. So one of the really cool conversations we had more recently is so you have a tens of thousands of person conference that is locating into a city. What is the percentage of melanated population in that city, right? And then how are you protecting the city from the tens of thousands of people aggregating for a particular conference, a particularly large international conference? What is the impact that we expect on the city? I mean, like you have a smaller example, but like the Olympics effect of like leaving this kind of this wave of in its wake, and is it a positive one as well? And then also when you're having it in one location versus another, are we now providing a safe space and a more in a less safe environment, particularly like on politics and what the state regulations are there? But then as a governing body, are we now condoning this region for their practices? So maybe we shouldn't be there. But you know, where I came out, and I'm very like confident about giving this position, but we had a really, really great back and forth on it, because we both were on the same side of just wanting to keep people safe. And it happened to be on the same side of this political issue that was in debate. But I like the idea of having that conference in this very this not a hostile landscape, because it ends up being an oasis, especially if it's one that upholds a code of conduct. And you know, go full circle, I love code of conduct. So we do this kind of wave, and like I mean, I guess from my explanation, I can talk for hours on how much I love community, and especially the way that we self-organize in open source is just really interesting. And how, like, you know, injecting money into it, and how to keep it funded, and how to keep people healthy, and where do those limits end. So I think it's really, really, really cool to do that.
And Don, would you mind just touching a little bit on, kind of borrowing language from your work, what the importance of being anti-racist in open source at the root of that?
Yeah. So I gave this little spiel before. I'll try to keep it short. But one of my favorite people on the planet, Coraline Ada Imke, started the ethical source license, which is very similar vein of the just a normal open source license, where it's a copy left, where all of the derivative works are of that license are now incorporated, and use that, like, those stipulations mentioned in the license. So so in an ethical license, instead of saying how it can, in my mind, regulated in the terms of capitalism, like whether or not you can sell that product after you use this piece of code or something like that. We are now using the lens of ethics, and so now have and then the Hippocratic license, which was the first one, Coraline Ada Imke created, is more like it's more general in a sense. So it ties to human rights violations and things like that. And it's really, really cool. We're on version 3.0, and we're working with the Corporate Accountability Lab, which is a team of excellent lawyers who are helping us draft these licenses, and also have like continued support should they be litigated. We're ready for that conversation. We're also having the conversation on whether or not you can call your code open, capital O, capital S source, open source, with these licenses included. Certain regulating bodies say no. We say yes. I'm up for that debate, you know? And I think we're really transforming that landscape. And so in particular in 2020, June, I was feeling particularly despondent because of the climate, and I wanted to do something, and I was always already in the open source space. So I created the anti-racist ethical source license, which we love because we come from a different perspective. We are now looking at, and I love experiential data. So we are now categorizing and cataloging specific events where software has done racial harm. And we also include people all types of attributes that are commonly conflated with race as well. So like phenotypes and skin color that may not define with the language used with race as well, and ethnicity as well. And we're using that experiential data to create a list of ethical violations and ethical stipulations to make sure software is anti-racist and actively anti-racist. And I have my own beliefs on how legislative bodies work in people's lives and how effective it is. I like this approach, but it's personally, I mean, as radical as I can be sometimes. And, you know, we can also define what radical means. But I also think it's a multi-pronged approach. So At the Root is also working on an anti-racist software developer kit, which is going to be and is continuing to evolve, but we're very much in the fledgling stages. So if you're interested in that idea, please come. We're starting in Python because that's my bread and butter. And we are providing tools and links to already existing APIs that help give you guardrails or just accessible tools to make your software or your code more accessible and anti-racist. Making sure you have a block feature on your social media app that you're creating. I mean, I think that is not well thought of, easy thought of as an anti-racist tool, but it is needed to keep people safe. And it can go on and on like that. Making sure the the faucet will like react to my hand, and providing tools to have to integrate with all sorts of realities and ways that software interact with our lives. And it's very much in the fledgling stages, as I mentioned, but we have big ideas.
Thank you so much for elaborating on that. I think that's so fascinating and important. So my next question for you all is, what do you feel that your lived experience and your identities help you bring into your work that somebody who is of a different experience than you might not be able to come at it with the same approach? So Ginger, go ahead and start with you.
So I've been talking to people, and this kind of goes back to my previous answer. I've been talking to people about the queer superpower when it comes to creativity. And, you know, some time back, I recognized that art for art's sake is great. You know, the way my parents raised me, they wanted me to be a concert musician, which meant doing violin in a specifically recognized way that was deemed skillful and expert. And great, that's fine. It'll make me a successful concert musician, but it doesn't make me creative. And it occurred to me that creativity, what's the one thing that you say about creative works of art? Well, you recognize that they're bold. They are taking risks. They're outside of any boxes that people can conceive of. And the LGBTQ lived experience, LGBTQIA plus lived experience, is one in which I think all of us have spent a lot of time trying to see the boxes in which we can safely exist within, while at the same time recognizing that we so desperately want to break those boxes. And so I linked together the LGBTQIA plus experience, art, STEAM, as more of just a bigger creative endeavor. And for me, art is about, it represents taking risk. And I try to embrace that in the technology work to the extent that typical business processes allow for it. But I also try to apply it in my own existence and in the musical work that I do. There's a lot of crossover, and I don't think we've really begun to tap into the opportunity that art offers beyond the mere practice of what's deemed skillful art.
Thank you so much. And Kimberly?
We should try. I also grew up as a violinist, and so I know exactly what you're talking about, and I still to this day, you know, have a very hard time. My friends tried to get me into doing like more like fiddle as opposed to classical, and then like they said the word like improvise, and I was just you mean you're not going to give me notes on a page to play? But I love your answer, and I think that that's so true in math as well. I read a really great article with the very punny title of mathematical inquiry, which is a little eye rolling, but like I thought the article, and unfortunately I can't remember who wrote it, the author's name, but had a really great point of like, especially when we study theoretical math, we're always asking like why and why not, right? We're challenging maybe traditionally held beliefs and structures. So for instance, like, why do we use base 10, right? Well, it's because like most people have 10 fingers, right? And so, you know, like people think of 10 as this like wonderful round number and powers of 10. Like, I don't know, I get a sort of weird thrill when I happen to stop my gas pump right at $60, right? I'm like, what a nice, wonderful round number. But really, that's only a round number because like we're so conditioned to this, right? And so what happens if we get out of that a little bit? What happens when we consider base 9, base 11, you know, thinking about altering our structures a little bit? And I think that this is something the queer community has been doing a long time as well, is like pushing those boundaries, asking why not? What happens when we try things differently? What happens when we step outside sort of like traditional socially acceptable roles? And so like, you know, sometimes I encounter mathematicians who still fall very under this like patriarchal, heteronormative, cisnormative life, like, you know, umbrella. And I just want to shake them and be like, I don't understand how you can study math and not want to break these structures, because that's what we do as mathematicians. Like that's what we're always asking, like, when I set new rules for myself, what can I build from those rules? What are, what if I change my underlying axioms? Um, and so I think bringing people of all different backgrounds together just enriches the field. It's seeing things, like, if you look at a piece of art, if you just stand in one place and look at it, you're not going to get a full picture, right? You need people coming at it from all different angles to give you an entire picture. And that's what I think is true of math, is you need people from all different lived experiences coming at these problems, because your solution is going to be that much stronger if you do it. And I gave the example, especially if I'm talking about, like, if I'm trying to build a model, maybe again I'm talking about like some type of infectious disease. When I do that, I need to consider people who live similarly to me, but also people who live differently from me, right? You need to consider, single people living by themselves. You need to consider multi-generational households. You need to consider, the cultures of whatever community you're studying, which may or may not be different from your own. And so I just, it's just so crucial.
I love that answer. Brian?
Oh, wow. Yeah. So for me, what I find interesting when it comes to being able to be a project manager and actually looking at problems, I have to have like two lenses. I need to be able to look at the big picture to make sure that we're getting everything met. Then I have to be able to like zoom straight in and be able to like be microscopic when it comes to it, making sure that the details all line up so we're getting to that big picture. And then at the same time, there's always motivations, because I work with teams and work with a whole bunch of different resources. People's motivations are always in the play and in the cards. And sometimes I was like, as I was telling Ginger, in my past world, actually working more in the advertising realm, it used to be a lot more of a boys' club, and so people would get, well, I would know like PMs would get distracted because they'd be like, "Oh, well, there's a very pretty girl there," and then I'm still like going, "Well, I hear what they're saying. I acknowledge that, but like that's not what we're here for, and this is what we need to get done." And so being able to be that guy, to be like, "Yo, there's a problem with this," it's kind of helped me a little bit and kind of been like a little bit of a superpower. And then being black on the top of that has helped a lot because um, I don't see it. Well, it's kind of funny. I don't see it. I don't get to a chance to get to meet a lot of different project or even product managers that have darker pigmentation as myself. So it's rewarding to be able to like eh, um, at least be the voice in that room to say, hey, I get what you guys are all saying. All of you guys pretty much have the same background and the same demographic, but like I come from a Southern Baptist family, so I could probably tell you, hey, that, for the church folks, that ain't gonna fly. But okay, so that's why I like to be able to use my queerness and myself to actually help get through to that. So, thank you. Turn it over to you, Dawn.
I love that. And also, I just talking about leading with like who we are and things like that. I made a little joke about being Southern Baptist, and some my like uncle and law person, I don't know, in the family, 16 years in the ministry, and we had a celebration. I mentioned it to a group of coworkers, and they like tensed up and no, the Southern Baptist, and they're like, how do we respond? I was like, no, we love to celebrate. We're like big there's going to be a cake. There will be some stomping. It's going to be great. Okay, like we can talk about how we're different. It's okay. I just, yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I lead, and to answer your question, like I gotta lead with everything about me. I am very queer, and all of the kind of my suit of armor that I've like dressed as a queer woman with my colored hair that I'm hella proud of. I've been purple for 6 years. My like in work in progress sleeve. Like I live with these things. I enjoy these things. I adorn myself. I like to kind of tweak who I am on the outside, and it really like reflects with this queer community that we have. It's just adorned and decorated in so many beautiful ways. So in that, like, it's also part of just everything I do and the crux of my work, and it is exhausting. And sometimes I try to figure out whether or not I'm doing this extra work that I shouldn't have to do. And actually, at the end of the day, I shouldn't have to do it. And sometimes I don't. And sometimes I don't raise my hand. And I could talk about the diversity of this particular conversation, but I'm fighting a battle on a different front. And so I'm just not going to talk today, and that's okay. And so there's this kind of way that the lens changes and like the requirements that I have to change, and depending on what rooms I'm in, am I a representative, or am I a token, or am I just me? And it almost never ends up being one of the three. It is always multiple, and like just different nuances between it. So I really wouldn't even know how to separate them. Yeah, for better or worse.
I think it's so important to talk about those nuances. And Brian, I love that you describe your queerness and your identity as like your superpower. I think that that's really important, and also like resonates with a lot of people. And so I'm curious, in your opinions, what are some of the unique challenges that LGBTQIA plus workers in STEAM face entering these fields, as well as entering the workforce in general? Let's see, we can start with you this time, Dawn.
Sure. Okay. Can you repeat it one more time? I thought.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Just one more time. So, what would you say are some of the unique challenges that LGBTQIA plus workers face entering STEAM fields, and also just like the workforce in general?
Yes. Oh, well, shout out to our interview. Go watch the amazing interview series that we were all participating in. But one of the things that I mentioned was even in the first step with just, I am a cis woman and I've always been she, her. And even in the first step of interviewing, they ask you to check a box, and a lot of my friends are not represented. You know, people I love are not represented in the first step, and how demoralizing must that be? So just like, let's lead with the fact that people fall out of the process even before you even get a chance to tally that number. I am of a complicated view set on, I love data and analytics and how to lead with that and how it paints a picture and a story. I think sometimes data is used to track people. I see a privacy is normal shirt. I freaking love your shirt. So like tracking everything is sometimes at our detriment. But then also tracking everything helps us figure out what progress means and looks like. So one, figuring out the opportunities where there's like that confirmation bias, where, you know, there's that plane where it all has bullet holes in like a certain region, but the inverse means that this is how you make a safer plane. I want us to make safer planes. I want us to track people before they even get into the system, but I also want to figure out a way to do it safely. I want to do it where people can own their privacy. We were talking with a friend in the audience about the Data Bill of Rights, and how Australia is working on a Data Bill of Rights. And there are various processes. I'm not an expert in it, but I'm very excited to hear about it through the interwebs. So I got on a tangent, but I think that those are ways in tracking the data through the employment process, and how well we're serving these communities is really, really important.
I think that's really important in a lot of these conversations around like DEI, but especially the diversity aspect, right? We want to make sure that we're doing it like not just for the sake of it, but responsibly also, and ethically. Brian?
Thank you. For me, it's basically being more having representation out there. I know when I first started in the industry, it was very much. I'm gonna date myself a little bit, but I started like in the late aughts, and so like when I started, it was basically like being gay was almost like a joke, and it was always like I was either classified as, because I was always out, because I was just not going to be in the closet. I dealt 20 years with my parents with that and not doing it for anybody else. So it was always like I would either get classified as either, oh, you're oh my gosh, and one of the guys from the In Living Color skit, which love it. It was funny, but at the same time, I'm working professionally. That's not who I am. Or you're like a comic throwback for like almost like a Will and Grace character almost, and that was kind of hard to overcome. But I'm glad that we're now at a space where we identify and we realize that, hey, even though those are tropes and stereotypes, those are not who that person is. And having the ability to be a representation and say, hey, I'm gay, I'm Black, but this is who I am, and this is what I'm about. It's adding to that conversation and then getting people to understand. It just makes it a lot better and more inclusive. So that's what I'm glad to see. Certainly,
I think about a conversation that I had once with a friend of mine who was an English professor, and I said to her something along the lines of like, queerness in math, it feels like a very, like, the math community, it feels very don't ask, don't tell, right? It's just not a conversation that comes up a bunch. You go to conferences, people just aren't really talking about it. And so like, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because it could be a really easy way to move through, like in a kind of stealth way to not maybe, you know, protect yourself if you aren't comfortable coming out. But at the same time, it makes it that much more difficult, right? If you do want to come out. I'm like, I never know how to broach, like every time, you know, and we don't just come out once, right? You come out over and over and over and over again. And I feel like every time I have new students or I meet a new coworker or, you know, it's another process. It's like how, like, it doesn't come up naturally, right? Like, oh, here's my function f of x, and by the way, I'm bisexual. Like, it doesn't come out. Whereas my friend who's an English professor was like, we're talking about ourselves all the time. We're writing memoirs, we're writing personal essays. It's just like, it's always there. We're always talking about it. And I was like, that's so different from my field. And so I'm constantly having to navigate this space of like, is it okay for me to come out? Is it safe for me to come out? How am I going to be viewed? Is this going to change people's, you know, perception of me? And I have a lot of friends who are in various STEM fields who are not out, and who don't feel, you know, I had a friend who told me, she's like, I'm not out at work. And so, you know, that's an interesting challenge just because it doesn't maybe come up as naturally, maybe in some other fields. So that's something I've experienced at least.
Yeah, you know, the comments about ethics and privacy, that really hit home for me because, you know, I think about how distant some technology fields are from the human condition. And there are some that are close, and then there are some that are very distant. And I would love to see that distance closed. I would love to see the human condition just naturally addressed in any of the technology work that we do. But I know that it's going to be a battle for quite a while. So the original question was challenges faced by queer people in tech. Yeah, just like you were saying, there's this constant coming out process. And for me, that process started at age 3 because coming out with gender identity typically happens before sexual identity. I was always coming out and running into barriers that prevented me from doing so because every step of the way, I was afraid of losing my parents because it was the world of black and white gender roles and black and white people on characters on black and white TV and separate beds. There was no concept of any of this in the popular conception. And so I was worried about losing my parents. I was worried about losing my friends, worried about losing my college opportunities. And then when I started my my first career in the defense industry, terrified of losing my security clearance because it would have been a death sentence to my career at the time. So I want to acknowledge that for every queer person in tech, it's a different experience, but I don't think any of us escape those concerns. I think it's always there, which is why I'd love to see humanity and technology get a little bit closer so that we can start eliminating that abject terror that affects people in the workplace, queer people in the workplace. And there's some lessons that I learned from people in the medical world because they're beginning to change their practices based on trauma-informed medical care. It's a whole school of thought, and it's still developing, but I think there may be a place for that in adapting the way in which we practice engineering and the management of engineering staffs to be aware that there are very different and often traumatic experiences that people like me might bring to a workplace that completely get in the way of being authentic, which stifles the creativity, which ends up dampening any opportunities I might have pursued for fear of being recognized or called out, or being identified as being trans at some point in time. Made it hard to even build friendships at work, and that's I don't need to repeat all this. I think this is all very familiar to people here. But yeah, I would love to see the workplace become a more humane place, because I think it will bring out so much more in everybody's contributions.
Yeah. I love that you talk about kind of not just supporting people for their identities, but their experiences, and like creating a very like humane focused workplaces. I think that's really, really important. And Brian, you kind of talked a little bit about the like tropes and everything that exists. And I think that's why it's really important that we create our own visibility, and that there is visibility of people who are themselves in these fields. And that's, what we can see. And so kind of building off of that, what are some steps, in your opinions, that companies and organizations and employers can take to build more equity in their workplaces for LGBTQIA plus employees? So Ginger, we'll let you.
Yeah, I've already spoken about some of that. We have these things called employee resource groups, which are great, but if simply noting their existence and checking off the box is all that an organization is going to do, that is far short of their potential. I think these employee groups are a valuable way to unearth the concerns, as long as they are involved in the deployment of the solutions, and actually gauging whether or not the solutions are simply performative, or whether or not they are actually addressing the deepest fears of certain employees. Again, it's going to be a different approach for each community. And I think that is both the cost and the opportunity of having plucked all of the low-hanging fruit already, and facing the reality that when you start getting into the more difficult challenges, boy, if you can crack that nut and solve those difficult problems, you will be so much further along as an organization towards addressing a lot of other problems that you are simply blind to. So, yeah.
Ginger, would you mind sharing maybe one example of kind of a positive support that you've seen through either your ERG or just like your work in that space? I'm curious, like one kind of tangible positive experience there.
Yeah, in the work that I do with PFLAG, there's this very common notion that kids who have just one supportive adult in their world while they're coming out reduce their suicide ideation risk by 40% or something. And even for the most clinical of parents, that's enough. For the parents who are already ready to do anything, that's just more motivation. And having just one or two people at work who were willing to have those personal conversations with me made all the difference in the world. There are two or three quick little anecdotes that I love sharing because they're so fast. One person, after I transitioned, came out and said, "I like the new you better," which confirms that I was a pretty sullen and depressed and angry person in the years leading up to my coming out at work. Another person said, "I wish I had your courage." And I don't know what they were dealing with. Could have been work, could have been family, but I think authenticity and courage is inspirational for everybody. And we can't carry that weight all the time. It requires an organization that genuinely demonstrates the kind of safety that draws that out and recognizes it so that it fosters more.
Thank you so much so important. And so, Kimberly, I'm going to return to the question. I'll repeat it one more time. So, I'm just curious, what are some steps that workplaces can take to build more equity in their workplaces for LGBTQIA plus employees?
I mean, I think one thing that we're seeing is that it's so important that we see representation at every single level, right? And not just, not just like all kind of like bunched in one group, but you need it kind of like homogeneously spread throughout your organization, right? And making sure that that's also happening not in like a tokenizing way, right? You're not trying to just like check a box or fill a quota or something, but making sure it's done in a very like organic manner, because people can tell, right? You can tell when an organization is just trying to check a box or have some token person that they can point to and be like, see, we do care about inclusivity, because it matters, right? And also like listening to people within your organization when they tell you that they're unsafe, or that there's someone who is doing harm, or that the organization is doing something to do harm, because I can't tell you how many times I've seen people be brave enough to speak out about something only for an organization to just kind of like dig their heels in and get defensive, and then you just feel terrible for having said something in the first place, and it just kind of like quashes any communication, and so and I, oh gosh, there's so many things I could say, like also making sure that the burden of all of this is not falling on those who are already marginalized, right? I can tell you how many times I've been asked to like do things, lead seminars, talk about like do safe zone trainings, talk about being queer, and it's like, yeah, I'd love to do all these things and I'm really passionate about it. I also have so much other stuff to do, right? That some of my other colleagues are not being asked to do all of this, and so, yeah, I think it's really easy to ask the one person who talks about this a lot to kind of like keep doing that over and over again, and recognizing like every person has their own human boundaries.
That's really important, and especially in making sure that like we're not reinforcing those kind of advantages that people have if they're not like required to take the time to like do that work also, that they're not in a position of more advantage again.
I mean, I've had at a previous job, one time I was asked to lead like a safe zone training, which I thought was interesting because I am a mathematician. But I was like, sure, I can do this. And I did it, but it felt very like the people who were there it was only there happening for them to, again, like say that it was something that had been done and to kind of like go through these motions. And I felt, particularly because like I am queer, just like the emotional labor that was involved for that just felt like, the comments that were said, everything that happened, like I took really, really personally. I remember kind of like getting off the Zoom call with my co-organizer, like after everyone had left and it was just the two of us, the two had put on, and she was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "I think I need to ride my bike and cry," because it had been such an emotionally draining experience. And so, other people need to step up.
I think I'm going to piggyback off what you said, Kimberly, because I feel it too. Companies, what I would appreciate if they just didn't talk about it, but they were being about it. How Nike just says, just do it. They really do need to just do it. I love it that, and I'm going to pick on a couple company things that they do, but I love it that February comes around, Black History Month, let's talk about it, great. And then June, oh my gosh, it's Pride Month, yay, rainbow flag, everything, now our logos has a rainbow in it, and the list goes on, and you see it happen, and for most of the time you're just like, okay, yeah, great, that's how you know what month it is. But I don't want to be talked about or be recognized in a month. I'm a person, I'm going to be this Black gay guy for the rest of my life. So I would like to have that acknowledged as well. So in just being mindful of that, I would say my most personal experience, like right now, I'm gearing up for my life change. I want to have a family. I want to have kids. I want to do that. Fertility rights, like surrogacy, paternity, maternity leaves, that needs to be available to everyone. It shouldn't just be, okay, I marry a wife, I get married, have a kid, and her and I are okay, straight. I should be able to do that with any partner that I choose, or even if I want to be single and do that by myself, I should be allowed that accessibility to it. And I feel like companies, in that sense, should be mindful to it. Think about their employees, not just, oh, this is their employee, but as a person. That they're, if I'm going to give you 20 years of my life, or at least 10, then you need to be able to handle those next 10 to 20 years. So that's how I feel about that.
And that's important because that benefits everybody, right? If there's paternity leave, that benefits all workers, not
Correct.
just people of the LGBTQ plus community.
The last spot is so easy because I can just talk about all of you. I want to respond to all three of you. So we'll go in reverse order. Heck yeah. So one of the benefits of being in capital B, capital T, big tech, it changed my life. I saw recruiter talking on the phone numbers and benefits, and I was like, you mean my next 3 to 5 years could look completely different? What? Like, it was just, I'm so thrilled to, and like, shout out to my fiance. Like, we're talking about kids and marriage and things like that. And like, literally had no idea how I was going to be able to afford children before this. So just the next generation is going to, my next generation is going to be so much better because I am able to access this career path and because I was, you know, and it had great, and I loved my job before too. So I went from one really amazing job to another. So fortunate for that. But there are things that are afforded and available with West Coast tech, not always West Coast, but West Coast like tech that just opens up doors for a marginalized person, triple, quadruple, depending on how you look at it, marginalized person like me. So absolutely, can you handle my next 3 to 5 to 10 to 20 years? Because I don't these opportunities are not always available for people who look and act like me and do the things that I do. I really loved Kimberly's point about we deserve representation in all of the levels, and even to take it to like a more spicy take is like I deserve a boring, ineffective middle manager, and that is queer somewhere. Like we deserve mediocre TV. Like not everybody needs to be exemplary, and it's not fair that in our marginalization that we all must be expected to be exemplary. And I would like to say it is not in my nature and my making to be like to not to settle and rest on my laurels. But if I wanted to, I it should be an option for a summer lesson. I should be able to turn off for a week or two, and everybody I think can point to a boss or a middle manager or you know even a senior leader who's kind of like checked out for a while and had no ramifications. And I would like that for my family, my community. Um, and even to that point, like mental health in the queer community, I don't believe it's a spicy take. I don't, and I want to make sure my words are correct because there's also words that are slung at us when we talk about mental health and LGBTQ issues. Like we are not a problem. We are full people. We do not intrinsically have issues, but because we are in a world that is not safe for us all the time and is a treacherous landscape, we get baggage. And to love my partner through her baggage and as she loves me through my baggage, we also deserve mental health treatment at work, and we should not be expected to feel expendable as we and as a friend or as my community member battles through their BPD or their uh, you know yeah no I don't want to list the DSM-5, but we should be protected. Um, so I appreciate that take as well. And and I'm really just going to go through all of them. Just great points. Um, also, I believe the human-centered company is really important, and I advocate for my friends in unions. we should unionize. I don't know about me. I don't know, but whatever. I'm on a stage and it's streaming. What I'm saying is, what I'm saying is, I love several people who are in unions and are queer people of color in unions. I work very closely with people in the Python and Django community who are employee-owned companies, and they have, and there are, pros and cons with working and navigating issues with your coworkers. But there is a certain protection and a certain flavor. And if I had time to write think pieces, I would write one on queer people in unions, because I think there's a strategic advantage in employee-owned companies for marginalized people.
I would 100% read that think piece.
But I don't have time to write it, but when I do, I'll send it to you.
Yeah. Yeah, so actually the last question is not my question. So I've asked all of the panelists to prepare a question for another panelist. So I just want to see what questions you have for one another. Brian, can we start with you?
Oh, wow.
Mix it up.
Love being sandwiched in the middle, but okay. My question is going to be for Ginger. Ginger, what would you say? Ginger, what would you say is your secret for longevity in the tech industry?
I think that particular secret is one that is fading away. My father hired on with Boeing fresh out of college, and he retired at Boeing. And those kinds of opportunities are harder to find these days. But I think what ended up bringing me to my employer, AT&T, where I've been for 26 years. So I'm pretty much a long timer there, and I had time at other companies before that too. But there is longevity in a career really is looking at all of the parts of one's life. And early in my career, I was interviewing with tech firms that eventually became massive and dominant. And I asked one of the managers, so I've got a newborn kid. How do you, as a parent, manage your time with your kids? Do you have time to do stuff? And I just got this blank stare in response, which told me that there were different kinds of tech careers. And that one was clearly not the one that felt right to me. So my longevity has been a blend of finding a place that really fit the needs that I had, which include, being able to gig with my band, being able to travel and do storytelling. There's freedom that I need. And that feeds me because I have been able to not only do those things, but pull some of those learnings back into teaching the tech space about art and stories and music. And it gives me just this fuller sense of purpose in the way that I have tied together a long career at AT&T, which has made all of that possible in recent years, and to be able to fulfill some of the personal yearnings that really give value to the work that I do outside of AT&T.
Ginger, I'm going to let you go ahead and ask your question.
Oh, yeah. So my question is going to be to you, Kimberly. So there's this thing called Fourier transforms. We were talking about that earlier. And my take on Fourier transforms was that every event, every signal can be decomposed into sine waves that have existed from the beginning of time to the end of time. And the only difference is that different combinations of them at different frequencies with different offsets. And what that tells me is that even something as fundamental as my coming out event was, in a sense, already in existence across all time. And that gives me a very different perspective on my queerness. It is not something that I had to hammer into existence. It was there the whole time. And we were talking about lenses and how mathematics gives you different lenses into your world personally and the world in which we exist. And I wanted to hear a little more about that.
Yeah. So, okay. So it's time for a math lesson.
Yes.
So, a Fourier transform is a way of taking, if you have like a function, so maybe, you've recorded some sound, and so sound is made up of vibrations, right? Or maybe you have data that might have some kind of like cyclical or repeating structure to it. A Fourier transform is a way of kind of pulling that signal out. And so, for instance, like when I speak, it's not just a single sine wave, right, with one frequency. It's many different sine waves layered on top of each other, all at different frequencies. And so a Fourier transform is a way of pulling out all of those different frequencies that are built up. And we were kind of chatting about the analogy of that, of like, I I feel like I am a person who is made up of like different frequencies of myself, right? And those frequencies come out in different ways in different settings, right? So there's like Professor Dr. Ayers, like the person that my students see. There's the person that I am when I'm with my parents. Sometimes when I'm with my parents, I turn into a real baby. Mom, will you make me soup? Just a real child. There's the person I am with my friends, right? There's the person that is sitting here on stage, and all of these facets are me, right? And so just the way that like when I take a sound recording, it's built up of all of these different layers. So am I, like built up of all of these different people, or it's all the same person. But and so I think, you know, I don't want to speak for you in your transition, but like, you have evolved over time, right? But at the same time, all of those layers have always been there, right? It's just like pulling out different signals at different times. And so I think that that's something that all of us are constantly doing. Um, and I hadn't really thought about Fourier transforms in that kind of with that analogy until we were talking about it earlier, and now I really like that. So, so thanks.
So I really wish that I had had a math teacher like you at some point. Kimberly, I'll go ahead.
So my question's for Dawn. I am such a big fan of all the work that you're doing, especially, working to make like coding algorithms more anti-racist, right? And so I'm an educator, and I have a lot of students who are CS majors, right, and who are eventually probably going to go into tech fields. And I just want to like, I feel like I want to take everything you do and just like inject it at the ground level. So like, what would you say to students who are gonna be tomorrow's like tech workers, and what would you tell educators that they can do to help grow that organically from the get-go?
Ooh, what a good questions. Oh, okay. So, my natural inclination and like my interpretation of your question is to start giving like this like checklist of things. Like, I've seen this area. I've seen this area. But the best answer is that I don't have the answer, and I think that's like a good thing. Like, I really am excited to like have and continue to contribute to a movement that's going to grow way beyond my imagination. I mean, I am but a later stage of a movement that has existed before me, in any iteration or ideation I have, that like is tangentially related and goes off into its own path, is only the beginning of something that's going to grow way beyond me. And it's incredibly humbling. I think there are brilliant students in your class, like I just know it. And so I'm my goal, and I'm going to give you the typical engineer non-answer of it depends. And my goal is to be a part of something where when people join and it has maybe a hint or a ghost of my fingerprints on it, but they know nothing about me when they join. They want it to be way bigger than me. I have absolutely no desire to be the face or the mouthpiece of an entire anti-racist movement. But I'm so proud of it that I just want to talk about it every time I get on the stage. So thank you for giving me that opportunity. So I am I don't know, give them my contact, give them my Twitter. I don't know, and that's
I
the
will.
best I can figure out how to do. And I've spoken to an engineering class before. It was kind of a more of a consultative research computing kind of conversation, but always try to jump in this like open source underpinning, because I think it is just that we are in every degree, like we are in every field, maybe 1 degree from open source, and that is very like that's just a very forgiving number. It's we touch it all the time, so I think it's just easy to weave into conversations, and hopefully there are other people, and I can equip other people with tools to be the mouthpieces and have their own iteration and ownership of the mission. Non-answer, but it was a really great question, and I'm gonna think about it, and I'm gonna write it down and get some
We're
really
gonna
great.
we're gonna chat.
Please,
I'm looking forward to it.
please, I'd love to learn about it and think about it more. Yeah.
John, do you have a question for? I think we can get all this because my question was for you, Brian. So,
Sure.
selfishly interested, I'm in a new role. I love my job and I love my coworkers, but it is getting to know people in like just a very new context, and then also behemoth company. It is huge. How as being a people person, as I've learned you to be, and I've seen you on your video and your interactions and your methodology with interacting with people, it's so intentional. I would love some intentional advice on like being a queer person and acclimating to a new company and developing those relationships quickly so I can be effective in my job, which is really what
Okay.
too big of a question.
No. Good question. Good question. I would say that secret is, as I was telling you before, I'm willing to be open with another person and just share. So, and to honestly share. So I give an example, as I told you before, my brother and I, because we're identical twins, we used to be childhood models. And so I shared a headshot of my brother and I when we were little kids with everyone, because I was trying to get everyone involved in a back to school donation drive, and I needed to get their input in it. So I was like, "Hey, do you guys remember when you looked like going back to school?" Because we had a picture of that in our headshot. So I showed it. It's me with like half my teeth missing because you're like 7, and like it was embarrassing, but like it got people involved, and we ended up getting like close to, I believe, like $3,000 worth of digital donations from a remote company with people like they weren't even in the area, but they were willing to donate and such. So I do that with my team. I'm open and honest with them, and at the same time, I share with them. I don't mind spending a couple minutes extra with someone to help them out with something, or even to hear them out. Because at the end of the day, everyone just wants to be heard. So
Yeah.
that's my secret to it.
So good. That's so good. I love that. Yeah, that's amazing. I want to thank you all so much for being here. I feel like I could talk to you all for hours, and I've had the opportunity to be able to talk with you all and hear your stories. But I just want to thank you for coming out here and being part of this and being part of the PATS program. I think that, like we talked about earlier, it's really important for us to be our own visibility, and I'm really inspired by all of you, and I hope that others feel similarly.
So I know that we've had what a wonderful panel. You all are going deep on some of these questions. And I want to highlight it is because of these types of interviews that we've done during COVID, when we literally shipped kits all over the country at record pace to get them there, and use things like Lyfts and Ubers in order to move those boxes back to their shipping state places. It was an incredible feat. But I will say, I want to highlight the fact that in the past 90 days, these conversations have had over 11,000 views across our platforms, and with over 524 hours watched of these interviews, because the conversation matters and the conversation is important. And not everybody can travel to DC and be part of it in live, but I will tell you the interaction online this evening has been incredible. We've had a lot of questions, of which I'm only going to ask one, just because of time, and then if anyone in the audience has a question. So from LinkedIn, As professionals in STEAM, how can we support students in overcoming some of the more common barriers you see them facing?
Anyone who wants to jump in, pick that question up.
I mean, I work with students, so I think I'll kickstart us off here. I mean, I said this previously, right? That I don't think people hate math. I think they hate the way that someone made them feel about math, and so, you know, encouraging all different viewpoints, and it's so hard because I see students come in and they're just have been told they're just so discouraged because they've just been told that their answers are wrong all the time, right? And that's just like that just completely shuts down the conversation. Whereas, how can you open up that conversation, right? Like, how can you, I mean, like, yes, 2 + 3 is 5, but also no, like sometimes it's not. And this is why I love math, and I think math is all about breaking things, and seeing what happens when you put new rules on things. And so, like, opening up that conversation to be like, there is room for you and your perspective in these fields. You have something to contribute. And so, like, even if a student like gets an answer technically wrong on a question, sitting down, talking about their thought process, how did they start? When they first read the question, what was the first thing they thought? What was their thought process? Show your work, right? And I think having that conversation is so critical to student success in these fields, rather than just being told your answer is wrong, you don't belong here, you're not good enough, sorry, there's no place for you. I think just opening up those conversations more is just so crucial.
Kimberly gave me some really great inspiration. So, in order to have those conversations, you kind of need someone more typically or a peer more senior than you to have these conversations with. And like finding a mentor is a really big hurdle for entry level people into STEAM fields, or especially for queer people of color in tech. And shout out to like communities like 100 Devs, where people are kind of very scrappily and with lo-fi resources, and I mean that in the most affectionate term because it reaches a broader audience with limiting barriers to get into these communities and have peer mentor groups and things like that. There's also this level of like nervousness is a common one I see. So there's a combination of being too eager or being too nervous to be able to like take that first step to get a community or to find a mentor. And it's a balance. And what I recommend is to really just like ask each individual, is it okay to communicate with you in this fashion? Should I jump in your DMs? Is that okay? Because not every queer person in tech should be a mentor. Like, it's a skill to be a mentor. And then also they should not always have to and always feel like they need to be on. So I love mentorship, and I'll say that on a live stream. I love mentoring people, hopping in my DMs. If you're respectful, is always welcome. And then the first thing that I talked with potential mentees is the way that I communicate best and the ways they can reach out to me and the things that I'm willing to offer to help with, because I can't get everyone a job at my wonderful employer as much as I wish I could. But here's a program that I've done. Here's a resume review type of thing that I've done before. I do this and I do that. And so and then also turning the onus back on mentors and recognizing, like, I truly do not believe there's such thing as a bad mentee. And I think when there are levels, and I am hesitant to speak in absolutes in most cases, but when there is a mentee that is not progressing as fast as you think they are, or there's a miscommunication, or they think they're bleeding your time, or they just want a buddy, well, that's okay. Like, then you need to be clear about the expectations. Sometimes they need a shoulder to cry on and say, this cis het white male boss was really mean to me today. And I go, oh, they're there. If we have that relationship and we've built that rapport and we've had that conversation, that is the type of, that's what I have the bandwidth for. So really kind of putting onus on mentors to own that, because I know the question may have come from a student. So not for you, but then also recognize like they're still learning how to be a mentor and just ask what the operating procedures are.
I wanted to jump in there and just say one thing I would encourage them to do is imagine, open up your, be open to the endless possibilities out there. I know for myself, I always wanted to be in advertising, but I didn't know what I wanted to be. Didn't even know like project managers exist until junior year. Our ad club, we went to New York. We're at Ogilvy, and I saw this beautiful black woman walking around, but she was being harassed by like everyone. Like, oh, I have a question. Wait, what are we supposed to do with this? What are we supposed to? And she's like, I'm just trying to get my coffee, and I was like, I don't know what she's doing, but I want to do that. Like, that's me. That's me right there. And it just clicked. And I was like, okay, I don't know. And I like, remember I sat down and I talked to her for like a good, like 15 minutes. And I was like, what do you do? And she's like, oh, I'm project manager. And she's like, I just babysit and just answer everyone's questions because they can't remember anything. And I was like, wow, that's great. And I didn't even think of the possibility of, all my interest in like technology and like, oh, I was doing Facebook stuff because it was fun with my friends and group that would eventually roll into my job and that being there. So I would just say, open themselves up to imagine themselves endless possibilities.
Do we have time to take maybe one question from the audience?
Maybe one quick one with
Okay.
maybe one person answering.
Okay, we're gonna be here afterwards too, so if there's more questions, we can feel free to approach us.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for all the wisdom shared on this panel. My name is Mariah Barber, and I'm founder and CEO of the tech startup called Invisible Strengths. We're actually building a diverse pipeline of folks that are queer, folks that are BIPOC, and have disabilities, and connecting them with inclusive employers. So this was great to hear. We've been able to focus on inclusive design and partner with HBCUs to bring in fellows and students so that they can get that first exposure. We focus on folks underrepresented and intersectionality, which I did hear a bit of that mentioned on the panel. But we know folks that have disabilities and are queer or queer and Black also deal with being underemployed or unemployed because of it. So I was just curious about like what you guys' vision is for including folks that are differently abled, and also just kind of a subset of it, getting more of our kids to know about STEAM, that know about STEAM, to know about startup. Because startup is really lacking with a lot of diversity, as we know. As a founder that stands in the middle of a lot of Venn diagrams, I put myself in places and try to mentor and create those pipelines, but we need more. When we know that less than 3% of venture capital goes to women, less than 100 Black women have ever raised over 1 million in VC. So the space is lacking, it's primed up for more folks to enter, but do you have any ideas about pathways for that and making it, more of an option for our students? I know there's a lot in that question, but I'll wait till after to talk to folks too.
I'm ready though. I'm ready. Do you know Arlen Hamilton? Yeah. Oh, queen over there. I don't have the answer. I know there's some great people in that space. She's one of the people I follow. I hope other people on this panel may have more suggestions, but I know she's queen over there.
Well, we'll be here, so if anyone else has questions, please feel free to approach panelists directly, if that's okay with you all. But quickly, I want to come back to Don's point about the importance of mentorship, and we're actually really, really excited at LGBT Tech to announce kind of the expansion of our PATHS program. So for us, visibility and STEAM of our community is really important, and that's a really important kind of barrier for a lot of people, but we also want to be taking a holistic approach to kind of addressing the barriers of entry into STEAM for LGBTQIA+ individuals who are passionate about those fields. So we're really, really excited to announce that as of November 1st, we will actually be opening our first grant cycle to be able to give grants to LGBTQ plus individuals who are entering STEAM education fields. So that's open. There's no narrow definition that we have of what qualifies as education, with the understanding that a lot of our community members are discouraged from entering STEAM, at younger ages. And so we are looking to empower community members who are going into STEAM education through grants of up to $5,000. So those applications will be opening November 1st, which is next Tuesday. So we're really excited about that. And along with that, we are also launching the Paths Mentorship Program. So we will be basically building a mentorship community for LGBTQ plus individuals who are currently in STEAM fields and who are looking to enter STEAM fields. So if you're curious about any of that, we actually have the cards with QR codes on them, all of the information that links to either the applications for mentorship, mentees, mentors, and also contact information if you're interested in getting plugged in. Please feel free to write me an email. My email's on there, but also you can sign up for our mailing list and you'll get notifications about when the grant cycle and everything is starting. So we are really excited about that. And I want to thank you all again so much for being here. It was amazing to have you all here and be able to talk with you all in person.
Fantastic.
No, thank you.
And thank you for organizing this. This entire process, my interaction every step of the way with Paths has been just wonderful. And I just want to also make sure you're clapping for you as well.
Yes.
Seriously, it's been great.
Amazing.
And I do want to take a moment to actually recognize Kristen. She has worked extremely hard to pull this together, but also has been working behind the scenes for many months to pull off a mentorship program and to pull off a grant cycle, which is just another huge step in program to LGBT tech and the way that we're working nationally across the country. So Kristen, thank you. And thanks for pulling this together. And thank you all for being here and attending online.
And please stick around. We have lots of food, lots of drinks, and we'll be here for a while. So please enjoy and mingle. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask us. Thank you.
Thank you.